Let's start with BPC-157.
Sure.
What is it? What do we know about it? We'll explore safety. And what is your stance on it from the perspective of a consumer and a clinician? So first of all, what is BPC-157?
The best way to look at it is, as humans, we've been looking for medicines in plants for thousands of years. And in the last, let's say 150 years, we've been looking for medicines in cells. So animal-derived versus plant-derived medicines is the way to think about it. You think about aspirin, you think about metformin, the statins, those were all discovered in plant tissues. Statins more so fungi, but you get the point. Now we've been looking into animal tissues to find cures, medicines, treatments. So a group in Croatia in the 90s looks out for this peptide called BPC that they eventually named BPC. It's a 40,000 Dalton giant peptide called BPC. BPC-157 is 15 amino acids from that giant peptide. We don't naturally make BPC-157. That's what you'll commonly hear online. We make BPC, the big protein.
Did this group go looking for
Yes.
body protection compound? For those that aren't familiar, in the laboratory, you can take a tissue, grind it up. You can do what's called fractionation. You can start separating basically cells and tissues and liquids according to the size of different proteins. Like different filters will just like certain filters will let sand through or pebbles through or boulders through.
Yep.
That's kind of what you do. And then you figure out what the sequences are, and then you throw them on cells or put them into animals and you try and figure out what they do.
Yep.
Why were they motivated to look for what eventually became BPC?
So Pavlov, the famous scientist that would do the experiments on the dogs with the bell and making the dog salivate. The other work he did was on gastric juices of dogs. What he'd do is he'd put a hole in dogs' stomachs. He would feed them food and then get the gastric juices and sell that as a medicine.
That's how he made his money?
Yeah, that was part of his business.
So he got a Nobel Prize. He was also kind of like, what did he have a call code? It was like enter Pavlov for discount at checkout.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So this is BPC before BPC-157 exists. There's probably other peptides and compounds in there, but they found that gastric juices had positive effects on healing, on people that had GERD and these kind of
Wait, so
issues.
people were taking BPC in the time of Pavlov.
They didn't know what BPC was. They were taking gastric juices from dogs.
For what?
GI distress, GI discomfort. Some people would try it for wound healing. There was a big push in this era for finding animal tissues and putting them into humans. That science fizzled out. At the same time, there's a scientist, Hans Seeley, that's coming up with the stress adaptation theory. And he notices that animals are stressed out, 3 things happens to them. Their adrenals get really big, so they make more cortisol. Their gastric lining gets destroyed. And then their thymus gland and their lymphatics shrink down. And he has this published paper where you have clear adrenal from a stressed animal versus a non-stressed animal, a thymus from an animal that's stressed versus not. So this group is looking and thinking hey, Pavlov had this gastric juice. Hans Seeley said that there was damage during stress. There must be some kind of cytoprotective or organoprotective compound in the gut. The stomach is a very rich endocrine tissue. It makes ghrelin, all these other hormones. So they're like, there must be something else in the gut juice that protects the gut lining from further damage.
Were people drinking the gastric juices of dogs?
From
Were they
Pavlov?
Drinking them?
Drinking was mostly what they did.
And it was supposed to be a medical elixir.
Yes.
Presumably it had many
Yep.
many things in it, many peptides.
For dyspepsia and upset stomach and this kind of stuff is what people were thinking about.
Do the reports point to the fact that it might have worked independent of what was sold on Dr. Pavlov's non-existent website? This was in the early 1900s.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
And then Celia was what, 1930s?
I think so, yeah, it was about 100 years ago.
Someone will correct us if we're wrong. And this other group in Croatia
was 91.
91. Okay.
Their first paper talks about this, hey, there must be some kind of compound. They identified the big 40 Dalton protein BPC. And then they were like, well, what's causing the actual biological effects? They identified BPC-157, the 15 amino acid peptide that's causing all these effects. There's actually more peptides in gastric juices that some other scientists may or may not have already identified. This field of peptides is going to be very interesting because almost every organ has a signature of peptides. If you think back, Dr. Vladimir Vulovich in 1850s, 1880s, finds carnosine and carnitine in muscle of cattle. So you can think of that the first peptides that are found are carnosine, and then carnitine is the amino acid that have positive effects on strength training and performance and different effects there. But that was the whole idea is hey, there's muscle peptides that may have muscle effects, right? There's gut peptides that might have gut effects.
So this Croatian group isolates this 15 amino acid kind of mini segment of BPC. They and others start injecting it into mice. Inducing injuries to nerve, to tendon. Maybe describe a few of those effects. I'm familiar with that literature, but I can tell that you are far more familiar with it. So what are some of the impressive effects that they observed that led to where we are today?
Yep. So they did all kinds of horrible things to these mice. They would, sever tendons and then give them BPC through oral or injectable intraperitoneal administrations, and they'd have faster healing times. They would sever ACLs of the mice. They would do burn wounds. So when a patient has a burn wound in like the ICU, they end up having crazy gastric ulcers. But if they were able to put BPC on topically for the mouse, they would have no gastric ulcers. They name it as this anti-stress compound is how they look at it. Now, when they do that Achilles paper on the mice, that's what explodes the bodybuilder interest and leads us to today where we are like, oh, MSK injuries must be BPC, tendons and muscle injuries. But the original idea of BPC was to use it as a gastric treatment, not to use it as a musculoskeletal.
What is so striking to me about BPC, and by the way, that's not an endorsement for BPC, just what's so striking to me, because my lab worked for a long time on optic nerve repair and neural regeneration. Nerves don't like to regenerate in the central nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, they do it. They do it slowly, but they do it.
Yep.
Not in the central nervous system. Ask anyone who's had a stroke or an optic nerve injury. It's a tough road at best. There are data that I've seen with my own eyes that show that you can accelerate healing of tendon, of ligament, of nerve pathways.
In animals, yes.
In animals, yes, thank you. And that it just generally promotes, quote unquote, repair.
Yep.
That's kind of weird.
It is weird.
Right?
Very.
Because I could spend the next 10 hours or more telling you about all the ways that people have tried to get nerves to regenerate and couldn't. And as you point out, this thing doesn't really have one specific, at least known receptor. So the data on the gut make a lot of sense. This is, after all, a gut peptide. It makes sense that gut peptide could get lots of places in the body.
Right.
But what is it doing mechanistically, if we know, to support regeneration or replenishment of all these different tissue types? Because a neuron is a very different cell type than a fibroblast or one of the bits of collagen that make up different connective tissues.
Yep. It's modulating a lot of these growth and healing pathways. Like in the models of damaging the endothelial layer or the epithelial layer of different tissues, you'll get more VEGF signaling. So that's the vascular endothelial growth factor. So you get more blood vessels, angiogenesis being formed, which creates a lot of the controversy around BPC safety. You'll get cell migration, especially when coupled with TB500 and TB4. You'll get more access of the healing factors to the area through androgenic pathways. On top of that, you'll get an anti-stress effect. So the other big thing that they did was they'd give corticosteroids with BPC-157 to these mice. And usually when you have a wound and you give corticosteroids, the corticosteroids will slow or even stop the wound healing from happening. When BPC was administered, the healing was either the same or even better.
Is BPC considered anti-inflammatory? Because based on what you just said, it almost seems like it helps maintain some of the pro-inflammatory response. Some people might be thinking, why would you want inflammation? What Dr. Bakri just said is if you block inflammation with corticosteroids, you aren't going to call in the signals to repair tissues. So lowering inflammation is a dicey thing that maybe we set aside for later in the conversation if we have time. But is it thought that BPC is lowering inflammation, or is just somehow hitting the gas pedal on all these regenerative, restorative biological processes?
It's more putting the gas pedal on these processes to bring in the immune system, the healing factors. For example, in one tendon model, they noticed that it increased the amount of growth hormone receptors on the tendon. So theoretically, this would allow more growth hormone to dock in and cause the outgrowth of the tendon and the regrowth of it. So there's that theory there. Downstream, it will modulate nitric oxide synthesis. So that's a big thing when it comes to wound healing because you need to dilate the blood vessels. You need to call in different cells. So it's really changing the way cells behave at that level. But that's only for the tendon side of it. They also did weird things on the neurological side. Like they would make these mice drunk. Okay. And they would then give them BPC and they'd get less drunk when they go through mazes.
Oh boy.
Okay.
We did not just recommend you take BPC with alcohol. I just want to be very clear. But people are good, will do their own interpretation. So I'm being semi-facetious, but very interesting.
And then also they would get the mice drunk and then have them withdraw from alcohol. And that withdrawal is deadly. If we have a patient in the hospital that withdraws, they could die during that withdrawal if they're not given benzodiazepines. They got BPC and they didn't have the withdrawal symptoms. I'm like, what's going on here? This is a very interesting compound. I think it gets all the hype for the MSK stuff, but I think the neurological neuropsychiatric, let's say, and then gastric effects are way more interesting when it comes to that because it's modulating the gut-brain axis in an interesting way. We'll have people come to us and they're like, my Adderall's not working since I've been taking oral BPC.
Are they happy with that effect?
No, they're not happy. They're very mad because it seems like it's blunting their Adderall. So it's doing something from dopaminergic signaling on both sides, both withdrawal when it comes to like the GABAergic side, but also the peak of signaling. So if you like peruse Reddit, which you should never do, you'll find all these anhedonia discussions about BPC. People feel like depressed and low energy.